Hey everyone, welcome back to the Incredible India podcast series. I'm Sam, and I'm joined, as always, by Taylor.
It's genuinely exciting to be here, Sam. We are stepping far off the beaten track today.
Absolutely. Today we are plunging straight into the Andaman Islands, specifically a tiny yet historically monumental place, Ross Island. Our sources paint this picture of a memory palace, a place balancing precariously between two major eras.
Where human ambition was literally, well, swallowed by the rainforest.
Exactly. It sounds less like a historical site and more like a set piece for a tropical adventure film.
That's the perfect way to frame it. Our mission for this deep dive is to unpack those precise layers of history.
Right.
You've got the stark colonial ambition, then the sudden seismic collapse.
A very literal collapse.
Very literal. Then the brief, tense wartime strategy, and most visually striking of all, nature's patient, unstoppable reclamation.
So this isn't just history behind a rope.
Not at all. It's a story told in stone and vine, where time literally does its destructive and restorative work right out in the open.
Okay, let's unpack the beginning of that story. Before it became this haunting ruin, what was the genesis of Ross Island? How did the British turn this small outcrop into such a colonial power hub?
It all begins in 1858. Ross Island was established as the undisputed administrative and logistical headquarters for the entire British operation in the Andamans.
So it was the command center.
Crucially, yes.
Yeah.
It was the central nervous system that governed the massive, brutal penal colonies spread across the archipelago. That includes the infamous cellular jail, all the orders, all the communications, all the governance. It originated right here.
Which is just, wow. Given the harsh reality of the surrounding penal colony, it seems remarkable that they would choose to replicate a European lifestyle there. What was the drive to make this island so aesthetically appealing?
Well, it speaks volumes about the colonial mindset, doesn't it? They had to create an environment that felt familiar and comfortable for the European officers and their families. A total bubble. Despite the immense distance and the hostile climate, the effort they put in was staggering, which is why the island earned the nickname the Paris of the East.
The Paris of the East, that juxtaposition is almost absurd. What kind of architectural and logistical feats did it take to earn a title like that, especially when it's situated in the middle of the Bay of Bengal governing a prison?
It wasn't just functional buildings. They imported material, brick, and specialized labor to create neat rows of bungalows.
Designed to mimic British standards, I assume.
Exactly, complete with verandas and high ceilings to, try and combat the tropical heat. They installed a dedicated printing press, manicured gardens where officers' wives could stroll.
And all the social amenities like tennis courts.
Tennis courts, badminton areas, the works.
And the sources mention a church and a bakery, right? That detail about the fresh loaves of bread really drives home the effort.
It does. The bakery producing fresh bread every morning, it just symbolizes the determination to maintain a civilized, orderly British life.
An iron-fisted order wrapped in tropical elegance. I love that description.
It's perfect. It was a completely segregated society. The officers lived in luxury while the convicts, often political prisoners, were engaged in the back-breaking labor of constructing and maintaining this elaborate fantasy world.
It forces you to mentally construct that stark visual contrast. On one side of a narrow channel, high culture, social ritual, and freshly baked goods. On the other, the deprivation and brutality of the penal colony.
Powered by the very people their administration was designed to suppress. And the maintenance of that elegance must have been a logistical nightmare, constantly importing everything they needed.
So it was incredibly resource-intensive.
Unbelievably so. Maintaining manicured lawns in a monsoon climate requires constant vigilance and effort. Every element of Paris was a direct assertion of power, a physical denial of the rugged tropical reality they occupied.
But that denial, that imposed order, it couldn't withstand the fundamental instability of the land itself.
Which brings us to the Great Equalizer. It wasn't a political uprising or a massive revolt that brought down this seat of power.
But the earth moving beneath their feet. Let's discuss the fault line and the fall. Taylor, why did the British finally abandon this elegant, resource-sucking hub?
It all comes down to geology. The Andamans are not fixed, ancient landmasses. They are part of one of the most tectonically volatile regions on the planet.
We're talking about a major fault line.
A huge one. We're talking about the convergence zone where the Indian plate is actively subducting or diving beneath the Burma plate.
So it's literally sitting on a major continental fault line where massive forces are in a slow-motion conflict.
Exactly. This subduction created the vast island arc that runs from the Indonesian archipelago north towards the Himalayas. Ross Island in this grand geological narrative is profoundly young.
A temporary outcrop, really.
That's a great way to put it, an outcrop that is constantly being reshaped.
And the Earth reminded them of that fact in 1941.
Precisely. The sources identify a devastating earthquake in 1941 that, as one description states, shook its very bones.
So it wasn't just a few cracks.
Oh no. It compromised foundations, it ruined the carefully constructed plumbing and water infrastructure, it rendered many of the key administrative buildings structurally unsafe.
It sounds like the sudden reality of the environment completely overwrote the elegant fantasy they had built.
It did. Once the buildings were compromised and the infrastructure shattered, the island was just no longer tenable.
So no longer viable for administration.
The cost and effort of rebuilding to maintain that colonial standard in such an exposed location simply didn't make sense, especially as global conflicts were escalating.
They
They evacuated, and what they left behind was an open invitation for the forest.
And here's where the story gets so visually compelling. It moves from history to ecology. It wasn't an immediate collapse into chaos, but a slow, patient reclamation. Let's dive into nature's unstoppable artistry.
This is the island's signature feature. When you visit, you aren't looking at neat, curated ruins. You're looking at what one source beautifully calls a tropical Gothic novel. The decay process is less about sudden ruin and more about organic, gradual integration.
Give us some of those specific details. What does that integration look like on the ground?
You'll see the delicate start of the takeover. Thin roots snaking through the arched windows of the old bakery, searching for a purchase. The heavy, damp air promotes moss and fungi that rapidly degrade wood and mortar.
And the collapsed roofs.
You see the soft decay of officers' quarters where roofs have collapsed inward. They create these natural, sun-dappled courtyards where ferns have colonized the broken stone. Every tiny fissure is exploited.
And the ultimate exploiters are the banyan trees. They seem to be the island's signature visual, almost acting as sculptors.
They are the main event. Banyans and other strangler figs are the most prolific artists of this scene.
They didn't just grow around the walls.
They swallowed them whole. The sources describe their roots cascading like frozen waterfalls over the imported bricks and concrete.
Wow.
These massive roots act as external skeletons, holding up walls that would otherwise have crumbled decades ago.
So you get this incredible visual paradox.
Exactly. The tree is simultaneously destroying the structure and preserving its shape.
That is an incredible visual metaphor. Nature both consuming and memorializing human effort. And speaking of surreal visual elements, we have to talk about the unusual animal life. The deer.
The deer are a fantastic anomaly. They were not native to the island.
So how did they get there?
They were deliberately introduced by the British during the colonial era for pure aesthetics.
Okay.
Nope. A bit of European parkland charm brought to the tropics. They were essentially living lawn ornaments meant to enhance the manicured gardens.
That is just phenomenal. An imported status symbol that then became a symbol of the island's wild future.
Exactly. Once the island was abandoned, the deer were left without any natural predators. No tigers, no leopards.
So the population boomed.
It adapted and flourished, creating this utterly unique ecosystem where wildlife grazes peacefully between crumbling archways and mossy colonial paths. It's a very strange, quiet spectacle.
And ecologists who study the Andamans consider this a textbook case of ecological succession, right? The scientific process of how life returns.
Absolutely. The island is essentially a natural laboratory. Succession begins with those small disturbances.
The cracks in the mortar?
Right. They collect rainwater, creating microclimates. That water encourages small, resilient ferns and grasses. Those plants invite insects, which then attract birds and bats.
And the birds bring seeds?
They bring seeds in their droppings, which include the seeds of the large banyans and figs. It becomes a perfectly self-reinforcing, accelerating cycle of nature creeping back in.
It's a powerful realization that the most rigid, ordered structures are ultimately just temporary supports for the next stage of biological life. But the human story here didn't end when the British evacuated. It just changed hands.
It did. The island's strategic value was too great to ignore. This brings us to the second major human layer, the Japanese occupation during World War II.
So we shift from the elegance of empire to the stark utilitarianism of wartime strategy. Why was Ross Island so crucial to the Japanese war effort in the early 1940s?
For the Japanese, controlling the Andamans, and especially Ross Island, was critical for naval defense and surveillance. It sat directly on key supply and transit routes in the Bay of Bengal.
So it was an observation post.
A primary observation post and a defensive stronghold against anticipated Allied counterattacks.
And what visual evidence do they leave behind? How does it contrast with the British ruins?
The contrast couldn't be starker. The British sought grandeur, height, and airy space.
The Japanese sought defense.
Defense, concealment, and utility. They carved low, heavily reinforced concrete bunkers and strategic tunnels right into the bedrock. These are structures designed purely for survival under bombardment.
It's fascinating that you have these two conflicting histories sitting almost face to face. You have the romantic, vine-draped elegance,
Right next to the severe, brutal concrete remnants of 20th century warfare.
and that tension is part of the experience, I'd imagine.
Definitely. Walking the paths, you transition instantly from thinking about colonial balls and fresh bread to thinking about strategic defense and the harsh realities of conflict. It adds an entirely different, tense texture that complicates the narrative of simple decay.
Let's transition now to the experience of the modern visitor. After soaking up all that history and ecological drama, what does it feel like to walk through this multi-layered living museum today?
It's transformative. As one source puts it, history isn't locked behind glass here. It's alive, breathing through roots.
I love that.
The humidity, the smell of damp earth and decaying wood, and the constant sound of the surrounding sea, it creates an atmosphere that forces you to slow down.
To really absorb the passage of time.
Exactly. You're not just seeing ruins, you're witnessing the dismantling process in slow motion.
And the most powerful symbol of this, for many, is the church.
St. Andrew's Church. Once the centerpiece of colonial religious and social life, today, only its skeleton remains. The arches still stand, but the roof, the ceiling, the internal furniture, all are gone.
So this structure, built to enclose a rigid colonial ritual, is now entirely open to the tropical sky.
And that transformation is what makes the effect strangely uplifting, despite the sad history. The canopy and the huge leaves of the trees filter the sunlight like stained glass, replacing the artificial light with natural illumination.
That's a beautiful image.
The church stands as a testament that the story never truly ends. Time simply changes the handwriting in which it is told.
The island seems to invite a sense of perspective. It forces you to step back from the specific dates and names and focus on the fundamental forces at work. The feeling is one of profound, quiet resignation.
It is. The island rests in a state of beautiful, dignified surrender to the natural world. It challenges the human notion of permanence, showing that even the most meticulously planned, iron-fisted empires are temporary footnotes compared to the slow, patient rhythm of geological and biological processes.
That is a remarkable synthesis of this deep dive. It truly makes you rethink where we place our priorities when building monuments to ourselves.
Indeed. It offers a powerful counterpoint to human hubris.
So to end our deep dive today, let's return to that initial technical context you provided. We learned that the Andamans are geologically young, formed by millions of years of tectonic activity, a massive, slow-moving continental arc constantly reshaping the land.
Right.
Considering the millions of years that created this tiny outcrop, how does that perspective change the meaning of the relatively short 80-year span of intense human history that played out there? From British elegance to Japanese occupation.
It shrinks it down to an almost immeasurably brief breath. It frames the entire human drama, the ambition, the luxury, the cruelty, the warfare, as a fleeting moment. A brief theatrical pause the Earth allowed before gently continuing its own millennia-long, unstoppable narrative.
Wow.
That realization, that perspective, I think, is the lasting impact of walking the paths of Ross Island.
A profound thought to leave you with, forcing us to consider the unstoppable artistry of time in the forest.
Agreed.
If you decide to travel to Andamans, we have a recommendation. 5 Senses Tours organizes tours across India, which are immersive cultural experiences. You can email contact@5senstours.com. Note 5 is written as a numeral in contact@5senstours.com or WhatsApp to +919-845-677-446.